welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Gary Minchell, the founder of the Manufacturing Connection, and you can find me at themanufacturingconnection.com. Let's start quickly by looking at the screen and familiarize yourself with it. If you take a look around, you'll find the chat tool. You can click on that and you can tell us where you're located and just chat back and forth. If you have questions for us, and at the end of this session, we will answer as many questions as possible, please use the Q&A tool, not the chat tool. And before we get started, let's take a look at some upcoming events from IIoT World. On November 16th, they have Analytics at the Edge, and on December 7th, IIoT World Manufacturing and Supply Chain Day, which I'm sure will be fantastic. A lot of information. This track runs for 58 minutes, and you'll have time at the end to switch over and go to the next session in this track. And that one is called Include Industrial Metaverse Features in Your Existing IoT Platform. It wouldn't be possible to run this virtual conference without sponsors. And we have a big thank you to our sponsors, Dark Pulse, GE Digital, Intel, Hitachi Vantara, Ursa Leo, and Siemens. And then a word about the host of this conference, IIoT World. IIoT World is the leading authority on industrial IoT. IIoT World is a digital media outlet bringing the latest industrial Internet of Things, virtual conferences, and content to a global community of over 279,000 decision makers and influencers. IIoT World focuses on delivering daily insights on the industrial Internet of Things across multiple verticals. Online IIoT World curates a series of virtual events that draw thousands of delegates. We've all heard Mark Zuckerberg talking and promoting the Metaverse, and it's a new thing for consumer technology, a platform for increasing advertising revenue, perhaps. But meanwhile, the manufacturing sector technologists are also exploring uses for the metaverse. The industrial metaverse digitalizes information to transfer them to the worker. Some industrial players already use augmented or mixed reality solutions to reduce error rates, improve training experiences in different areas across value chains. Also, they're using this technology to manage logistics for assembling products as well as for quality control. The question today is, for this session, will the industrial metaverse disrupt global industry? And to find out, we have an excellent panel with a diversity of points of view and technology specializations. And let me give you a quick introduction as we look across the slide. As GE Digital's Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, Colin Parris leads collaborative teams to reach across GE to leverage expertise that increases business impact and creates scale advantage for digital transformation. He champions strategic innovation and identifies and evaluates new breakthrough technologies and capabilities to accelerate solutions that solve emerging customer problems. Colin created and now leads the Digital Twin Initiative across GE. Next up, we have Dennis O'Leary, who's founder and chairman and CEO of Dark Pulse, a publicly traded company headquartered in Houston that offers a diverse array of innovative and groundbreaking sensing technology solutions that enhance safety and modernize global communities. Through his leadership, Dennis has also united a family of subsidiary companies that have unique technologies and services with the ability to monitor, detect change, and safeguard human security in our environmental resources. Next up is Brian Ballard, Senior Vice President, Solution Delivery at TeamViewer. He's a driven entrepreneur, leader, and technologist focused on solving real problems for the enterprise, making sure that companies deliver quality in everything they do. His current venture, Upskill, now part of TeamViewer, is working to change the world through wearable technology. And next, Attila Janos is senior manager of Accenture. He started as a mechanical engineer, becoming head of a digital group of 40 by transforming conventional capabilities into innovative building blocks like extended reality, simulation, digital twin, and industrial metaverse. He's currently responsible for GTM strategies, offering development plans, solution architecting, team and delivery management. So welcome all of you, and with this diversity of views, we should have some interesting discussions. So I thought, first off, disruptive and metaverse is a broad term, and it's made up of a whole lot of building blocks. Each of those building blocks in and of itself, I believe, can be or is disruptive. And I thought maybe we start off by talking about what are the main building blocks we're speaking about when we're talking about the industrial metaverse. And I don't know, maybe we could start with Colin, and I could say go around, but my screen might be different from yours. So maybe start there, and just everybody can pitch in.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gary. It's my true pleasure to be here. So when I think about the building blocks, really, I think about sort of 6 blocks, and I'll tell you the categories. The first block is, can I get state that can create the metaverse? So when I look at data, I need data coming in, I need IoT to get data from machines, I need 5G for networking. That gives me the state. Then I think about digital twin, AI, and models. That allows me to get the insights on whatever I'm looking at in our metaverse. Say the metaverse is a metaverse of a factory. And the third thing is all the automation and controls. This allows me, when I get the insights, to do something to the machinery I have. Then the fourth thing I need is AR, VR technologies. This way I can connect the humans. So I can now get the insight, do the work with humans as well. Fifth thing, things like crypto, blockchain. So can I get the transaction? I did useful work. Can I get paid for it? And then the last thing for me are the use cases, right? What are the use cases in which immersion actually gives you the ability to deliver value? So those are the 6 building blocks I think of.
Anybody else want to chip in with some their thoughts on building blocks? I think you all have different perspectives. So.
Yes, I think Dr. Parris really nailed it too. I mean, we see these exact same issues, like, and maybe paraphrasing a little bit, like data that is accessible and interconnected is obviously a key to this. Without that, you have no fabric to the industrial metaverse. And I think one of the things that Dr. Parris hit on is, he talked about AR and VR. It's really about having these advanced interfaces for the workforce. And generally, that means a form of AR or mixed reality for those who are working on, say, the factory floor, or VR for those that need to transport themselves sort of into a different environment than they may be sitting in. But without those, you can't bring the person to that work experience in a way that they can collaborate in an information-rich environment. So, like, these are really important building blocks that we see that without them, it's really business as usual. And I think, if you think about things in terms of the Industry 4.0 definition that we've been kind of grappling with over the last decade, really that push into intelligent, interconnected, and then enhanced environments really is what brings us into the metaverse versus just a new industrial digital twin.
I think also intertwined in there is usability, ease of use, right? And then functionality. We have to be careful not to create in vacuum. You have to have the end user in mind, the industry, and it's going to vary by industry what that interface is going to look like. So, just again, I think just sort of woven into that fabric.
Okay, that's kind of the what that we'll be talking about. And by the way, I see some questions starting to come in, and don't forget to use your Q&A button down on your screen to ask questions, and we'll get to them. But the next thing I thought maybe we talk about is how, what, how, and then why. What are the key considerations for harnessing the industrial metaverse? It's one thing to talk about what it is and what the building blocks, but most people listening here want to know how they can get into it and what are the considerations they'll have to do when they dive into this whole new realm. Now, I'm not going to pick on somebody. Somebody have an answer on that to start us off?
Maybe I can go with that. So when it comes to harnessing the benefits of industrial metaverse, I think real-time aspect and the connectivity aspects are important to mention. So you have basically full-time access to a persistent experience, be it your factory, be it your site, be it your plant, but basically your presence is there for any time you can visit your facility. Enablement of simulation methods, for example, on your virtual products or factories for future predictions are also key and something we should think of. And the other is maybe the horizontal integration of your operation. Maybe we can think of from the warehouse to the production line to the site level and the whole supply chain aspect. So that's definitely something we can exploit with industrial metaverse, although it's in an early stage. So it's about just to shape and find its ways.
Maybe I can add to what Attila said, because he gave a great building block there. I think there's macro stuff and there's micro stuff, right? So macro stuff is, you got to get all the we need enough bandwidth, right? To get like the real-time data. How do I get that? I mean, I may need 5G to get capabilities. So interconnections, how do you get all these technologies to fuse together in a way that I could actually build an environment and as Attila mentioned, have the persistence? How do you get the models to work together? Because I would have a model of a turbine, somebody might give a model of a generator. Can these two talk? So I think those are standardization things that have to happen in the large scale. And then I think in the smaller scale, I think Dennis said it best. What is the thing that you're doing in your industry? What's the use case that you've got to solve in your industry that based upon this immersive experience gives you value? Then do you have the skills in your company to build it? Do you have the data, access to that data? Do you have the rights to that data? So I think those are the kind of things you've got to look at in order to put some of these pieces together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And going back to the question of like, what are the key considerations we think about here? I think one of the things that shouldn't be forgotten is the whole point of the metaverse and the industrial metaverse as well is anyone anywhere in the world can be a participant in this metaverse. So space and time are things that we really think about. These are important themes. The real-time nature of data matters. And this is why there's such a big focus on human interfaces of the future or the present, depending on kind of where you think you are in that curve. And also, like, if you think about everything like GE and others have done for the digital twin, like those are about being able to interface these models with real-time data of objects or processes in the real world. So that space-time play is really important. And the second one to me that is a very important consideration, and this maybe ties into some of the questions I can see popping up in the Q&A space, the way you move in and out of these, what are you think of as intranets or intraverses within the industrial metaverse, security and data exchange really matter. And for me, this is where like blockchain and decentralized authorities come into play. There isn't going to be one sort of overarching metaverse here. There's going to be a lot of data exchanges or people that want to, exchange information with each other, or maybe take information, add to it, put that back out in the marketplace. And you need to see where the data is and ensure that there's authenticity along the way and security around that supply chain of information. So without those things, I don't think the industrial metaverse really has a future. So these are important underpinning things that really need to be well understood for people to take advantage of them.
I was just going to add, again, it's all about the data and having access. And, as this machine continues to grow, it's for better and for worse, right? For worse, we have to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to actually move the data. But then for better, as we collect that data, we continue to plug that into the model, and then we see improvement over time. So we're definitely in an interesting position, right, going forward. And it's going to be even more interesting to see sort of what, drops out at the end, right? Where do we end up with this, and how far is it going to go? So very exciting for me, and I'm sure for everybody on the panel.
It's kind of like a journey rather than an endpoint sort of. Let me probe a little deeper based on some questions I see coming in. So we talked about building blocks and how we harness it and put it together, and Colin talked about different models, and Brian also in his comments. But they're asking things like, is there going to be a standard, maybe standard data interchanges, maybe, or just walled gardens everywhere? Maybe you know, rather than looking at the way things are today, what do you see coming that would address that kind of thing? And actually, that's a never-ending question, right? Because I've been writing about this for 20 years, and it's kind of the same thing that comes up. So I'm just curious what you all think about that.
Oh man, you should have a poll up where we could each vote on that one, because I think, you know, like the real world, everyone's going to have different opinions, but I think a lot of this comes down to purpose. Like the industrial metaverse, just, I mean, like it's like cloud. It is going to become an overloaded term that captures a lot of different people's and businesses' goals and motivations, and what you'll see is special purpose things pop up. I mean, like I've got little kids in my house, and they go play Roblox, which is often lauded as an example of the metaverse. And man, they go from one very, very different type of experience to another. And I think we're going to see those same things play out on the industrial side, where, you know, what a beverage bottler is going to need is very different than somebody that makes maybe heavy industrial equipment. Supply chain people may need something very different than design people. So I think we're going to see a lot of different purposes come up, not to call them necessarily walled gardens, but they're going to be, you know, experiences that are very, very different. And you're going to have, I do believe, a lot of different types of decentralization that are going to enable, hopefully, strong interoperability. Even with the internet these days, I mean, like how many people in the audience participate with industry standard groups like OpenXR or maybe Kronos or some of these other governing bodies that help knock down some of the interoperability bottlenecks, so at least we have a chance of even interoperating over the internet. So I think a lot of these themes are going to keep continuing forward, but there's going to be new technology that helps us do it in a way that allows us to accomplish some of these goals faster.
I always question, where should I buy real estate, digital real estate? Is there going to be one metaverse and the other ones, right? You invested on this plot of land and then it's gone because, you know, company XYZ is the company. But I think industrial wise, it's obviously going to be segmented. So I agree with that. It seems like if you're like, for instance, we're in a bridge in California. I think there's a group of people or individuals that would be interested in, you know, what's going on in a bridge versus what's going on in a factory, right? So you'll see the segmentation, but I think ultimately we kind of all have to play together. So there should be some sort of, and there's going to be interaction, but some sort of interlinking, I think, between what we're all working on. But to your point again, calling it gardens, right? Various gardens linked to various industries, but I think ultimately we're kind of all in the same sandbox, right?
I agree with the statements, you know, that Brian and Dennis have made. I also think there's some other factors that may show up. So, for instance, economics. When I think about a walled garden, I'm in the energy space. And so if you wanted to actually understand how you would build something, a piece of software that would run on the grid, you know, if I have a metaverse in which I have all of the models in which I do generation of power transmission or distribution, why would you go someplace else? Because maybe it's cheaper. I have all these models already. They're connected to the data, you know, and I'm just giving you a flat price. You could run your algorithms. You could see if it works. You're okay. So in that case, the walled garden makes a ton of sense. I am not worried about data security. I get, as somebody trying to write an application that runs on that, great benefit from that walled garden. And then I think the other things, if you listen to the discussions with maybe the military and the Department of Defense, they would like to have twins of all of the assets they're buying. And they're going to demand from you that you give them a twin every time you sell them anything, whether it be a jet engine, whether it be a certain type of military equipment, and so you're going to have to obey their standards in order to fit into their system, and their standards are all around not only interoperability but zero trust. So I think you'll have a combination of both being built, and then I really hope what was said before, that we have an open source movement in which we try to do it all, because I think that's the way you get human ingenuity showing up.
Good. Any other?
I was just to say, I agree on the open source, right? You're moving civilization forward. There's always room for profits, right? Profits will come.
Exactly.
But yeah, definitely working together. And again, I think because we're all kind of in our own little worlds right now, building out,
Yeah.
we believe is value, right? But I think ultimately, yeah, it comes together that we all team together, we build it, one industrial metaverse. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see, right, Colin?
Also,
Yeah.
my 2 cents, it's really that everybody is trying to figure out how their metaverse is looking like, but ultimately it should be one at the end, because at the end, metaverse is kind of evolution of the internet, and as it is one internet only, there should be one industrial metaverse or one metaverse at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah.
You're talking about building blocks, but it sort of like starts with data, and I think it was Brian earlier on mentioned Industry 4.0, and a lot of that had to do, I don't hear the term anymore, cyber physical systems, but Colin has talked about digital twins. So we've got data, we've got the digital asset and the physical asset, if you will, and we need to bring them all together. Maybe we bring them all together with a headset. I don't know. I've personally, because I'm a writer and I go talk to a lot of people, I've tried on all kinds of headsets and glasses and so on. And I'm just fascinated by those building blocks that are going on too. A lot of stuff coming together, and maybe it just needs to continue. To move us a little bit, and you could keep the questions coming. There are a lot of good questions coming, and it's going to be tough for us to try to answer them, but I'll try to weave them in. But let's talk about impact a little bit. What do you think is the biggest impact on industry? Stepping back a little bit and saying, now we've got all this technology and we're putting it together and we're putting the building blocks together. It's kind of a little bit like, why should management care? What's the impact? What's going to happen? And I'm not sure who to ask first, so I don't know if somebody's prepared and wants to jump in.
Maybe I can start. One of the biggest impacts is the way of collaboration. I think all across the employees, but all across the supply chain with vendors and other partners. So that will definitely change, and the way that remote assistance and field workers maybe can be triggered and supported by AR, VR solutions. That's something new. Also, the way of designing products, maybe just taking an example, that instead of working with clays and creating a lot of waste management, waste production, you are able to do early design reviews on your virtual product, do some testing on your virtual prototype, and so on. That leads to the point of sustainability as well, for me at least. And last but not least, the training aspects, like having our people or having employees trained virtually in a safe environment, maybe much more cheaper, maybe across the globe, across countries, is also, or having them trained or on even a non-existing product or machine or operation. That definitely something we can exploit from here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think employee engagement is going to be an incredibly interesting area to look at. It's almost sort of one of these things, just kind of expected, whichever metaverse definition you're looking at, the more consumer commercial one or the industrial one. It really is going to be like, how does an employee change their engagement model? Like you just heard about, like the training aspect of it. we can have a more rich understanding of the job we're going to do, the things we're going to work on with these new training tools. We're going to have better collaboration and connectivity between different people and different skill sets within the workforce, because we're just going to blow away the constraints of space and presence. And then the thing that's like really interesting to me is like, as we go from sort of the industrial revolution style of human capital, where like we're just trying to stamp out people that fit into like this nice, neat little job definition, into one where people can really collaborate, and you bring in the power of like AI and using some of these models that you've heard Dr. Parris talk about, and adding collaborative insights into these engagements. It's just going to be, I think, a really exciting time to work, and a medium in which to engage. So for me, employee engagement is the number one, and it just creates so many kind of interesting secondary effects.
Yeah, I agree with both Brian and Attila. The two things I think about right now, maybe it's because I live it so much, is I look at the challenge we have with inflation and supply chain and labor. So when I think about inflation and supply chain, right now in our factories, I've got to find a way to deal with the fact that the cost of raw materials may be so high, or their scarcity, that I have to retool my line, or even maybe redesign pieces of my product. How fast can I do that? If I have a metaverse and I can do some level of simulation with people being immersive because I've got a human process in it, then maybe I could retool this thing fast enough to deal with the fact that I no longer can get, this material, or maybe I can't get it in this time or this price point. Second is labor. There are extreme labor shortages right now, and quite a few people are retiring, whether it is the great retirement or it's the quiet quitting. You have less talent. How do I train them fast enough, to Brian's point? And then maybe I just don't need to use the metaverse to train people. Maybe I can need to use them to train robots, or robots and people. Because when I look at the productivity I need right now, we have moved from China to Vietnam to Bangladesh to actually get a reduction in cost, of labor costs. But the reality is, with rising food and rising fuel prices, that is going to be gone soon. So maybe that's got to be used to train people where you are fast, or train robots. So I think all of these things come together.
I think it also adds to the cost factor, what you're saying, in reduction of costs. Our current focus is critical infrastructure, and mostly those are run by governments. A lot of times, at least in the United States, local government, like state and city, there's lack of funding or delayed in funding. So you can't have the amount of inspection, let's say, for a piece of infrastructure. You don't have enough for the people. So by having, again, sort of this remote access industrial metaverse, you're not flying people all around the country trying to do these inspections in particular. So I think it's not, so a reduction in labor need, I think, but at some point, but I think initially, to your point, Colin, is that we don't have enough people out there, so I think initially it leads towards I guess easing the burden of trying to find talented labor, but then there's that cost reduction again, because you can get somebody onto or into a factory or on a piece of infrastructure remotely. So again, you're not flying this person around the world. And then again, I forget who brought up the blockchain aspect of it too, but then it's also paying that worker who's working remotely with their VR capability. So it's definitely going to be very interesting in the next couple of years. And like I say, we're all in the sandbox together. So looking forward to what actually drops out, right, at some point.
You guys certainly have a lot of ideas, which some of which I haven't heard yet. And I talked to a lot of people, so that's very good. I thought we might move on. We've talked a lot about building blocks and some of these new things, but I usually, when somebody's presenting to me, I get, I talk to people like Colin and other people, and so I'll say, why should I care? And I kind of get into that, but stepping back and looking at a broader business perspective, what are some of the benefits that industrial companies or power companies or whatever the business might be, what are the business benefits? What are the benefits people would get from even playing with all these ideas? Or are we just like talking because we're technologists and we love to talk technology? I don't know. So what do you think about that?
I was trying to not hog the board here, but no, again, Colin touched on it, cost reductions, right? And then efficiencies as well too. And I have to relate back to a project that we're working on. It's I'll call it near real time. So, and this ties into reduction in cost, is that, you know, you can set up your garden or your part of the metaverse where you have alerts to certain changes in like temperatures and things like that, especially in a factory setting. So it's again, you sort of have somebody on standby, I guess is the best way, or a team of engineers that when an alert is received and like a change in something, can be in anything, you know, not just infrastructure. At that point, then you have an engineer, or, you know, I guess the right trained person engaged and go into the VR, you know, using the VR capabilities, you know, versus having a team of people that's again on the road flying around. You don't necessarily. I think it's going to change the inspection world. I guess is what I'm saying. And you know, ultimately it becomes more efficient. But again, it ties back into reduction in cost, reduction in labor need as well too. Anyway.
Yeah, to me, a lot of it is quality, precision. And when we think about like if there's models and intelligence that we're bringing into the equation, the better and more interconnected, the more accurate, the more use of data we have, the more like feedback loops we have from what's happening in the world to the digital twin. I think more and more over time, the products and services that we produce begin to behave exactly as they were intended, rather than based on best guess and best knowledge prior to the production process. So I think that has a lot of downstream effects in terms of you know, what we might bin that as, you know, better mean time between failure, better cost, better ROI, but ultimately we're creating much better products that perform as intended.
And I'll just add to Brian, your group is a perfect example. We're not sending a text somewhere, right? You guys can remote it. That was a huge step forward. And then again, I think you're going to see acceleration as we go, right? We start learning, you know, the ins and outs and what the capabilities are now, and then what they can be in the future. But yeah.
Yeah, I love what my colleagues said, because I think they're all right. I think the cost aspect of it is massive one, given what we face in the next few years. I also think the innovation aspect becomes huge, right? So every industry I know it's in transition. There's an energy transition, there's a manufacturing transition going on because of the geopolitical constraints. There's a transition going on, you know, in all aspects of transportation in many ways. And so part of the challenge is, how do you apply innovation now? You can't just throw dollars because you have these really high interest rates. How do you get innovation? And how do you do it quickly and effectively? And, you know, maybe, as, you know, we discussed, the metaverse is that type of sandbox where I can go in and not only can I, you know, innovate and, you know, get a product built, but I can tie it to the supply chain to see if it works. Then imagine a situation where the metaverse itself watches me try to put together design. And when I leave the metaverse, all the AI in the background continues generating designs and throwing it out at me. You know, so again, I come back the next morning, there are 15 designs, 10 of them are rubbish, right? They don't work in the real world, but 5 of them might have a nugget that may make sense. So that discussion Brian had before about time, maybe it's a way to compress time. And if you could compress time and cost, whoever does that well wins. So I think it's a massive change if you can do it.
I really like what Colin said, because for me also Metaverse is really about persistency, and really if you step out, it should keep going on, and things should happen inside. And when we talk about benefits, I think it's also worth to mention the power of analytics that we can exploit. So if we come to the, for example, back to training, we just deployed the training application for one of the robotics clients. And, you know, if you are doing trainings in physical versus doing trainings in immersive way, you can track the performance of the employee. You can get the analytics on, I don't know, hesitation time, which were the type of exercises he or she was struggling with. So you can adjust your education system later on that. And that's never happening when you are doing a physical training with a real trainer. He cannot really judge on that. So that's the power of analytics, what we only can do in the industrial metaverse.
Good. The title of this session has to do with disruption. And sometimes I could put on my cynic hat and say, okay, every marketing person that sends me a press release includes disruption in there somewhere. But actually, I think this could be very well disruptive to the way we've been doing industry. And I'm just curious for your thoughts as we've been talking about all these different aspects of this topic. What do you see that's disruptive, or is it that disruptive, or just a little bit additive, or is it just going to change the way we're doing things? So I'm curious. You guys are really right out there. So what are your thoughts?
I think just to define this, like we in a past life, I used to work with a group that was looking for disruption in a 10, 20, 40 year horizon. And one of the things that they use to define disruption is true surprise. Like when it happens, you're really shocked by it. And I not to downplay it a little bit, but I think because there is going to be so much work between companies to pull this off, and there's just a lot of technology that's underway. I don't think we'll be so much surprised when it happens, but I think we will be surprised by maybe some of the outcomes between those that adopt and those that don't. And I think, areas that we'd see there is, customer experience, for instance, will be, I think, a mile wide gap between those that engage in it and those that don't. And I think you'll see that through product quality. I think you'll see it through engagement models, where how you support your supply chain, your buyers and your vendors. I do think that will be a night and day difference. So that's one I've got my eyes on.
I think also a big segment is going to be labor, right? That's for sure. And again, I can only relate to what we've been doing. We launched, we have a digital twin of a bridge in California called the Huncut Bridge. And we actually launched the VR capability a couple of weeks ago in DC. In terms of disrupting, how to relate it to disrupting, I could tell you that the bridge that we have this thing in, calling it an intelligent bridge, it doesn't require, or it will require, a lot less maintenance. It's not going to require a physical inspection. They can inspect it remotely, internal structures of the bridge as well too. And then what we're doing is we're collecting data from that bridge. So, as the years go by, you have, and you're building infrastructure. It could be anything. It could be, bridges, could be buildings, you name it. We're collecting data on each sort of piece and part of that structure, regardless of what it is, temperature, stress, strain. So then going forward, as you're building, again, new infrastructure, you can then go back and take a 20-year sort of view of what that piece of part did in an actual environment, and then change the design on things. So it's going to, I think, completely disrupt engineering in terms of infrastructure. It's going to disrupt labor, that's for sure. Because again, you're not sort of flying somebody, or let's say an oil and gas pipeline, for instance, or even a wind turbine. You're not driving hundreds of kilometers into the middle of some, area to do an inspection, or, So again, you have the reduction in labor, the reduction in the travel. You have the information that you're going to collect, like even in manufacturing, like Colin's talking about. Whereas that information, that data is extremely valuable, and then it causes or creates more efficiencies going forward. So we'll see more and more efficiency as we go. And again, testing the models versus in real time. Again, what Colin's talking about, where you have this model running it for you, and then training we talked about. So, industrial metaverse the reality is it's going to disrupt a lot of things, and there's going to be, I think, at some point, as this thing grows and gains momentum, there's going to be more and more players, and we're going to see even more disruption across multiple, I guess, economies, right? We'll leave it at that way.
Yeah,
If it's about the, oh, go ahead, Colin.
no, please, Estelle, I'll go after. Thank you.
Yeah, just Dennis was mentioning the visual inspection, and I liked it. And if it's disruption, I'm sure you know these antibiotics, robotic dogs doing these 3D scans, and NVIDIA came up with a nice example of putting them into Omniverse and teaching them how to walk on this uneven terrain, and they put like hundreds of robotic dogs on the terrain, and they were taught like in 20 minutes while separately on their own it's like 4 or 5 days needed. So applying machine learning in that and really reducing the teaching time at that level is something I call disruption.
Yeah, so I actually think it will be very disruptive. I think disruption, a technology can cause disruption, but when you have a technology causing disruption, plus you have external forces forcing disruption, I think you get that perfect storm. If I look at things like what's happening with global politics, right? You're at a point now where some manufacturing has to be back here just simply because you're not sure of the supply chain. Plus, there are all these new government mandates on what can and cannot leave. And so with that and the cost problem that's coming from the high interest rates, you have to react. And so smart people are going to find smart solutions. I see people talk about the metaverse, using that as a simulation platform. And then immediately what you do is you take all that information, because the good thing is that everything is digitized in time and space in the metaverse. And they're trying to send it off to additive platforms where the additive machine builds the part right away. And because of this time that you can do this in milliseconds, and then you can recorrect at every level of the layer, as you test and you find out that the part didn't have this level of fidelity or performance, because you could simulate this stuff when you get a piece of the part. The cycle of that happening, and it's all done in a certain way at that speed and that price point, I think somebody's going to have to do it. And once you get it done, it's a winner take all. It's the same way that the Amazons, the Googles, and the Apples showed up. And everybody's got to figure out that I need to be that winner. So I'm going to bet hard. So I think disruption is going to happen one way or the other.
I'm glad you brought it up, Colin, because I know GE pushed into additive manufacturing. And one of the things we're working on is a drag and drop type of software where you can actually 3D print things. And one of the things we were looking at, 3D printing a bridge, right? And you've seen like Gigafactory, they've already 3D printed. And there's other buildings that have been 3D printed. And the light went off when you talked about additive manufacturing, how you guys pushed into that space. Because you start looking at, again, efficiencies, and then think about it again. You have, and it's not just us, but everyone's running this model. We're collecting this data on all kinds of things, and then again, you sort of move. It's not just VR, but sort of virtual capabilities again in terms of additive manufacturing across all industries. So this is just like you said, a nugget. This is just the very beginning. It's like the kernel. That everything's going to grow upon, but just think about it. It's really endless when you start getting into it. And additive manufacturing, huge piece of the puzzle. Again, because right, the room we're sitting in, somebody built that. Imagine having the virtual reality and virtual capabilities to 3D print your environment as well. I mean, and then now you're talking other planets as well. I mean, it's endless, right? Harsh environments or dangerous environments. I mean, I was trying not to futurize too much, but yeah, it's coming. It's already here, and it's going to be very interesting to see, as we progress. I was going to say year by year, but now it seems like month by month.
So. Agreed.
Yeah.
Oh, it is quickly, and we're printing spare parts on the space station, right? So it's some of that futuristic isn't that futuristic. You all, I think all of you have touched on a term called efficiency, and maybe a couple of other things. We had an interesting question come up in the Q&A about productivity. Productivity is always in the news, and certain economists or other people bemoan the fact that we just don't have we haven't had an increase in productivity in a long time. I wonder if anybody here could speak to, is the metaverse going to help us in our productivity? I mean, Colin talked about, and all of you to a degree, about getting people, and some of productivity is how much stuff we can get out per man hour and all that sort of thing. So where is this going to take us? Are we going to break that little log jam of productivity and see a little better increase there?
For the training aspect, definitely. So you might know the cone of experience saying that after 2 weeks, we only remember 10% out of what we read, 20% of what we heard, 30 what we said, what we saw, and then it comes down that 90% can be retained if you do something and say something. So having that term, conducting trainings and operations or maintenance instructions in the metaverse would definitely lead to a higher productivity level.
I agree with that. I think the training of people, one dimension, the training of robots, the other dimension, because most factories now are automating. Again, because of the constraints you have on the planet right now, and the fact that you can't go to a low-cost infrastructure anywhere in the world, you're going to automate people and humans. The second thing I think is planning. One of the reasons why we have low productivity is that we planned for a world in which a lot of things didn't change. And so when you put a factory and you spend capital to put in factories and everything else, you can't change those easily. But right now, with the right planning systems, and the metaverse would be a great one where you could simulate a number of things, and actually bring in governments to help you simulate. So, you get the laws right, you can get the investment right. Now we can, build for, throughput and flexibility, so that when things change on the planet, you can adapt faster. And if you can adapt faster, then you'll see the productivity rise, because half the time I have these embedded costs that I can't get out. And so when you measure productivity, you'll see a lot of those things come into play. So I think the planning aspect of it is also a very powerful aspect of it.
Dennis, you always look like you have something to say, but
my mind runs a million miles an hour, so I'm trying to, not say too much, right?
That's fine. Another interesting question, in fact, it's popped up several times on the Q&A, has to do with another really big current topic, sustainability, you can call it, or environmental impacts, that sort of thing. And curiosity amongst our viewers is what impact will this have on the sustainability efforts of most manufacturers? Do you have thoughts on that?
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's a couple areas. One is just the power of being able to collaborate remotely, the amount of jet fuel you save, and not having to fly people out, drive people out to site to bring an expert technician in. If you can use mixed reality or augmented reality as a way to help debug something, I think these are really obvious ones. There's the counter effects of, what does it cost in telecommunications infrastructure, et cetera. But I think the data that most of us have seen suggests that this is definitely still a fairly big net positive in terms of sustainability. And then it comes into our designs, take aviation fuel. Could we design a better fuel? Can we design things that are more sustainable? Can we develop more products that can break through some of the physics barriers that have been holding us back? So I think that's the march of progress that's being made right now. But there are things that are happening today we're getting benefit from, and that's, I think, a lot of that has to do with the power of remote collaboration.
Fully agree with Brian. Maybe adding one point: the think about the brownfield extension of a factory, for example. So a lot of misdirections or pitfalls can be avoided with power simulating in advance. So no need to run on barriers and problems, because basically you can get your design finalized and fixed and properly before the commissioning and installation.
Yeah. Also in manufacturing, when you look right now at the board level, everyone thinks about sustainability in terms of what is an ESG. So scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 are the emissions that I throw out. Scope 2 is, you know, the support things. I have trucks and everything else. What's that? And scope 3 really is my supply chain. What are the emissions they throw out? How do I actually know that? In a metaverse, maybe it might be the first way I can look at the entire ecosystem, my factory all the way out to my supply chain, each of us putting in models, and we can sit together and we can say, these are the best objectives that we can have collectively, because I think sustainability is an ecosystem problem on the planet. It's not just one company, and we can say, okay, I'll do this. If I do this with these materials, then you can have the lowest amount of carbon coming in from the raw materials coming to me, and then the other integrators have pieces, and then finally me as the ultimate integrator, I can have the lowest carbon. So I think it's vital in sustainability. So the metaverse could have us plan this, it could have us operationalize this. When there are bugs, we could debug it. So I think it's a great tool to use.
Maybe even like a catalog of resources, right? For chips that you're building and things like that. So more efficiency of moving those items around, locating them. I think it's, again, we think in terms of environment, like emissions and things of that nature, but really it's going to go well beyond that. Again, hopefully we can all play together, and I say we, I mean the planet, right? Everyone on the planet, because that's really what you're going to need, right? It can't be one country over another. There's got to be integration at different levels, right? So it's going to be very interesting. Yeah.
That it definitely is. We only have a few minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes left. So I don't want to ask too broad of a question, but maybe you could, we've talked an awful lot about potentials in future and a little bit about the way things are coming, but maybe a sentence or two on a little more practical aspect. What's limiting adoption right now, notwithstanding that in the future, of course, technologists will overcome them. But before people go running out right away, is there like one limiting factor you see that people should be aware of? And like I said, we only have a few minutes, so.
Oh man, I was gonna say, like, we can just give people like an index into a much bigger discussion. Like, look at the challenges with IT/OT convergence around system discontinuity, access, and that's gonna peel back a lot of layers of the onions. But to me, that's the starting point.
I was going to say it's with every technology, right? There's the early adopters, right, and then then it kind of spreads out from there. So it's going to be, education is going to be a big part of it, so people really understand the capabilities and how they can apply it to their own lives and their own businesses. But it's up to the early adopters to get the word out there. So
maybe I would also add aspects like security, computing power, connectivity, because if we really imagine the best metaverse, then you should consider that everywhere is 5G and that the available, which is not the case, of course, on the field and so on. So these are definitely some gaps to be filled still.
I agree with everything, especially what Dennis said. I think we could spend hours listing the gaps, but I think the solution is that 1 or 2 early adopters who get the use case and get this thing done. It's amazing. After you saw the Amazon and Googles of the world do it, everybody quickly said, wow, we can get that done too. And everyone rushed to it. That's how the world works, right? You can't be left behind. So those first few leaders who get this right, I think, the rest of the gaps will get bridged and make money. It's always the and make money part.
It's true. In my discussions with a lot of people, senior levels, they complain that the engineers come in and talk about KPIs or, I can add this piece to the computer, and they ignore the fact that if we don't make a profit, we're not going to be in business. So sort of have to do that. And Brian, I appreciated your comment about IT/OT convergence. I built my whole fourth career on IIoT. It's the manufacturing connection had to do with connecting. So yeah, that's definitely something that is still ongoing, but is getting
Yeah,
better.
definitely not a finished project, right?
Once again, a journey. And I think industrial metaverse is a journey. It's not necessarily a single thing. It's putting together from the digitalization and digitizing all the way up to these use cases we've talked about. So I'd like to wrap up. I'd like to thank all the panelists for coming and sharing their insights. They were very, very interesting. I see a session rating just popped up on my screen, so please add your comments to that. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Again, without the sponsors, it's not possible to put these on. And our sponsors for this session, Dark Pulse, GE Digital, Intel, Hitachi Vantara, Ursa Leo, and Siemens. Their support ensures that we have all this great content to share, and we appreciate that. And thanks to all of you for listening in and for all your great questions. I tried to get to as many as I could, and tried to get that all answered. Fantastic, really appreciate it. And we'll give you time to get to the next session, which is called Include Industrial Metaverse Features in Your Existing IoT Platform. That should be, once again, another very interesting topic. So thanks to all of you for your support and for your comments. And I appreciated meeting all of you virtually anyway. That's part of the metaverse, I guess. And thanks to everything else. Thank you and have a great day.